Crazy facts about your body you won't believe. Part 1. Your hair naturally cleans the environment because it absorbs ozone gases. Humans have the same number of hair strands as chimpanzees. Our hair strands are just a lot finer. Your pinky finger controls 50% of your hand strength. Holding your breath stops hiccups. It's impossible to tickle yourself. Try it.
Yo, what's up? These are some of the strangest facts about the human body that you'll never forget. Part 2. Your stomach acid is actually strong enough to dissolve a razor blade. So if your parents were worried about you going out on Halloween, taking candy from strangers because there could be blades in it, just say, hey, mom and dad, my stomach acid could dissolve it, so I'll be alright. I'm just kidding. It could cause internal bleeding and a lot of other problems, but it's pretty crazy that it can do that. Sneezes usually clock in around 100 miles per hour, whereas coughs clock in around 60 miles per hour. But who knew that they both went that fast? The human heart actually has so much pressure in it that it could squirt blood up to 30 feet in the air. Humans are the only animals that produce emotional tears. Because yes, animals can get frustrated and they can shed tears, but the tears they shed aren't caused by their emotions. And actually more germs are transferred shaking hands than from kissing, so kiss away.
How rare is your body? Part 4. 10% of people have something called restless leg syndrome. This is a condition that causes the uncontrollable urge to move the legs. It's usually because of an uncomfortable sensation. Most people can raise both eyebrows, but only 24% of people can raise a single eyebrow. However, you can learn to do this yourself as well. Just 3% of people have gray eyes. If you have gray eyes, this means your irises have little to no melanin. Whenever you clasp your hands, you will show a preference of one thumb crossing over the other. But only 1% of people have no preference for one or the other. 10% of people are left-handed, and research shows that left-handed people tend to live shorter lives. Only 35% of people have perfect 20/20 vision, meaning most people cannot see perfectly without glasses.
This is what the perfect human body looks like according to science. And yes, women would have bloody baby pouches. A group of anatomists wanted to see what a person would look like if the human body evolved for peak functionality, and then took inspiration from other species that do things better. So firstly, the human 2.0 would have a sturdy chimp's lower back, and the shock-absorbing legs of an emu. Just posing it here for all my feet people out there. To improve blood circulation, she has tiny pumps in her groin. I'm not hearing anybody else. Our senses would be enhanced by having supersized eyes and the ears of a cat. Apparently titties are a flaw and had to go, R.I.P. Inside, we'd have the reliable heart of a dog, the graceful lungs of a swan, a choke-proof windpipe, and to ensure a pain-free childbirth, women would nurse their babies in a marsupial pouch. So the question is, if this is what the perfect woman would look like, what would change for a man?
Have you guys heard of the Beyonce possessed theory? There is a theory that Beyonce is possessed by a demon. Some even stating that she admitted this in an interview.
Sasha was in full effect. Sasha is my alter ego.
There is also a video of Beyonce performing, where people believe that the demon actually revealed itself. Yeah, this looks creepy, but I don't know, it could just be a camera glitch. Matter of fact, comment amen down below to ward off any evil spirits coming from this video. There's also a video where people believe that she admitted that a demon entered her body.
And I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me.
Now, the scary part about these concerts is they look kind of similar. Look at her concert and Travis Scott's next to each other. Some people believe that these concerts are actually rituals that people are unknowingly taking part in. And the scary part is this article even states that some fans coming from the Beyonce concerts experience memory loss and amnesia. But what do you think? Are people just reaching, or is something darker going on here? And hit that follow button because my next video will blow your mind.
The front of your tongue is curious. It's constantly patrolling in an almost autonomous way. For example, it'll chase the dentist around your mouth and you're not even aware of it. About 60% of people have some sort of parasite living inside them, either in the stomach or the brain. It can affect your hormones, cause depression, anger issues, other behavioral things. And in fact, people who don't have parasites, their immune system tends to get a little bored and will just start attacking random environmental things because it doesn't have anything else to do. There's a different version of you inside the minds of every single person you've ever met. Nobody really knows you, okay? Because the version that they have of you doesn't match the version of you that you have for yourself. Split brain patient studies suggest that inside the minds of every single one of us, there is a secondary consciousness that just sits and watches and waits, but it still has some control over our body and actions. There are gases inside of your body right now that if they were to ever mix, you would spontaneously combust. When you die and get an autopsy done, they don't put your organs back where they belong. They just tie them up into a bag and sew it into your belly.
These are deaths caught on audio, part 1. On January 26, 1967, 3 crew members were conducting a launch rehearsal at Cape Kennedy Air Force Station Launch Complex. The launch was scheduled the following month. The simulation was needed to determine whether or not the spacecraft would operate normally. And because the spacecraft wasn't loaded with fuel, it wasn't considered to be a dangerous exercise. At 1 p.m., the command pilot Gus Grissom, senior pilot Edward White II, and pilot Roger Shaffey entered the command module in their pressure suits. Immediately, Gus noticed a strange smell circulating throughout his suit, which he compared to sour buttermilk. The crew was going through their checklist when a violent fire broke out. And all 3 men's microphones caught it all. Just take a listen. It's also worth noting that there are aftermath photos of all 3 astronauts, and they are very bad. I really don't recommend looking them up.
The strangest things found inside human bodies, part 4. A man in China complained about ear pain at night, so his wife finally checked his ear with a flashlight and found a cockroach which had laid eggs in his ear. He was then rushed to a hospital where doctors removed those eggs. It turned out the man used to sleep with half-eaten food by his bed, which is how the cockroach made its way inside him. Next, in India, a man named Anuj Ranjan was in a serious car accident. After getting emergency treatment, he was sent home, but after 6 months, he developed chest pain, fever, and swelling, which continued for over 2 years. When doctors finally operated on him, they discovered an 8-inch long leather belt and cotton cloth somehow entered his stomach during the car accident, and the original doctors missed it and closed him up. Finally, a man from China was punched in the chest, after which he felt a strange pain and had difficulty breathing. When he quickly consulted doctors, they discovered an 8-inch long spoon stuck in his throat. He remembered he accidentally swallowed it a year before, and assumed it made its way out of his body naturally, but the spoon had been stuck in his throat the entire time.
Things removed from the Bible. The Book of Enoch. Once read by early Christians, it reveals details about fallen angels and the Watchers. The Book of Jasher. Mentioned in Joshua 10:13, but not included in the final canon. The Book of Jubilees. A detailed account of creation and early humanity, excluded for being too mystical. The Shepherd of Hermas. An ancient Christian text once considered scripture by some early churches. The Gospel of Thomas. Contains Jesus' sayings, but was rejected due to unclear authorship. The Book of the Wars of the Lord. Mentioned in Numbers 21:14, but the actual writings disappeared. The Apocalypse of Peter. Described visions of heaven and hell, but was removed for being too graphic.
Mythological animals that are actually real. Dragons are real. They're 10 feet long, 150 pounds, and you can find them in Indonesia. They don't breathe fire, but they have a septic bite. That means they'll sink their teeth into you and then wait for you to expire to painful infection. Also, they climb trees. Unicorns actually exist, except they live in the ocean and are covered in blubber. That horn is actually an inside-out tooth with millions of nerves. A narwhal's tusk is like a girlfriend. Some don't have any, and some have 2. These stabby boys don't use it as a weapon, they use it to flex for females. In 1493, Christopher Columbus was sailing near the Dominican Republic where he saw 3 mermaids. What he actually saw were manatees, but after being surrounded by nothing but seamen for 6 months, I assume he was so down atrocious that he thought this aquatic sea potato was a woman. And considering what he may or may not have done to a llama, I have no problem believing this story.
Urban legends from every state. Fingernail Freddy, located in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Here's the story. Back in the 1800s, 3 boys set fire to a cabin in the woods. The cabin belonged to a man named Freddy. At the time, he wasn't home, but his sick daughter was inside and she burned alive. For over a year, nobody saw or heard from Freddy. But then, the boys who started the fire were getting killed one by one. Their throats torn open and their bodies ripped apart. Not long after the murders, he was discovered in a secret cellar under the cabin. He was hung on the spot and supposedly murders anybody who comes there to this day. Some people think that Wes Craven based Freddy Krueger on this legend, but according to my research, that is false. Which state is next?
Nightmarish facts about your body that you probably shouldn't think about. Part 3. The acid in your body is strong enough to dissolve razor blades, which is why your stomach is in a constant battle to not digest itself. When you get a sunburn, your cells are dying to avoid becoming cancerous. A sneeze can blow out of your nose at over 100 miles an hour. So next time, be careful, because it's actually possible to break a rib simply by sneezing. If you've ever been on a roller coaster and feel like your heartbeat is in your mouth, it isn't your imagination, your organs are actually moving around inside your body. Humans are bioluminescent, meaning that we glow in the dark, but our eyes are just too weak to see it. There's a condition known as fatal insomnia, where one day you can't go to sleep, and eventually you die because of this lack of sleep. You know that moment when you're about to fall asleep and suddenly you flinch because you feel like you're falling? This is actually known as a hypnic jerk, and it alerts your body that you're dying, or at least thinks that you're dying.
How rare you are. Part 3. Number 1 is dimples. Only 25% of people have dimples. You can either have 2 or just 1 cheek dimple. Dimples are hereditary, so if either of your parents have it, you're most likely gonna have a dimple as well. Number 2 is the way your hair whirls. 8.4% of people have counterclockwise hair whirl, while the rest just normal clockwise. Only 5% of people have arched fingerprints. And you can see 65 have looped, and now there is a swirl, and only 5% has the arched. It's the rarest. Only 22% of people can wiggle one ear, while 18% can wiggle both ears. That's weird, you'd think it's the other way around. The ability to wiggle your ears may be inherited, however, it can also be learned with practice. Only 11% of people have naturally curly hair. If you have curly hair, you know the struggle.
There is no running from this monster, for not even death can save you. The ghoul is from Middle Eastern mythology. It is said that they used to be human. But not just any humans. They were cannibals that used to eat the living and the dead. They would also kidnap young children by taking them to abandoned places. Because of this, they were cursed with having a hunger they could never fully satisfy. So ghouls now roam the earth, robbing graves and stalking people who travel. By the way, ghouls can take the form of people they have eaten. So with that said, do you know of someone that could be a ghoul? Let me know in the comments.
Did you know that this man saved your life and you probably didn't even know his name? It all started in 1983 during the Cold War. A Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov was on duty inside of a nuclear bunker. His job was simple: watch for incoming nuclear attacks from the US. Night after night, he would pretty much just stare at screens, waiting for nothing to happen. All until one night, when suddenly emergency alarms started blaring. Petrov quickly checked his computer and noticed there was a nuclear missile from the US coming straight towards Soviet territory. Then a few seconds later, 2, 3, 4, 5 missiles were now about to hit the Soviets. All Petrov had to do now was make a call to higher command, but this one decision could literally destroy the world. You see, if he called stating there was a nuclear attack, the Soviets would likely send missiles back at the US immediately in retaliation, which would not only cause destruction, but could be the start of World War III. The computer said the attack was real and a high confidence alert, but Petrov had a gut feeling something was off. He questioned why the US would only only sent 5 missiles during a nuclear attack, knowing it would be hundreds. And also remember, the computer system he was using was brand new. Despite the pressure and the fact that he could be at fault for disaster, Petrov did call, but claimed the attack was a false alarm, trusting his human judgment over the machine. Everyone inside the bunker sat in silence, knowing they could die at any moment if he was wrong. But as minutes passed, something strange was happening. The missiles weren't showing up on the radar, only on the computer. The missiles should have hit by now, but nothing was happening, because what none of them knew is that sunlight had reflected off high-altitude clouds and tricked satellites into alerting. It was never a real attack, making Petrov's decision one that saved millions of lives.
Urban legends from every state. Retreat Tower, located in Brattleboro, Vermont. Here's the story. This is Brattleboro Retreat, treatment center for mental health founded in 1834. 58 buildings on 1,000 acres. And this one, abandoned and closed, is Retreat Tower, actually built by patients in 1887. Legend says it was closed shortly after construction, due to the high volumes of suicide from the tower. They say a common sight is a ghostly figure jumping but never hitting the ground. Which state is next?
Leviathan is the reason so much of the oceans is not discovered. Now let's talk about it. Now for a minute now, a lot of people have been doing their takes on Leviathan being in the ocean, and I honestly believe it is very true. And one of the main reasons is that it's only 5% of the ocean that is so-called discovered, or so they say. And I feel like they know not to disturb Leviathan. Now this ancient, huge sea serpent creature appears in several different books in the Bible, including Psalms, the book of Job, the book of Isaiah, and the book of Enoch. Even though the book of Enoch is technically a missing book out of the Bible, it is talked about a lot in there. And in these Bibles, the only person that can destroy this creature is God himself. No man, no weapon, no technology, no nothing can do anything to this creature. And the biblical description of this sea creature is that she is like a large sea reptile. The Leviathan is a female. There was originally 2 Leviathans, but God destroyed the other one so they wouldn't procreate, because we don't need any more little baby Leviathans roaming around the ocean. And in the Bible, this can be one of the most destructive and most feared creatures there is. And the reason why a lot of people believe that this creature is still in the ocean, simply because it's in the Bible. And then a lot of people was on Google Maps and they noticed this area that looked a lot like the sea creature. And it was moving. So people thought it was the Leviathan. And then there was a lot of stuff going on in the oceans with like sharks and whales coming to shore acting like they were afraid of something. And like different sea creatures that's like was deep in the sea that does not like come up, like was just coming up, like a bunch of weird stuff was just going on in the oceans. And people believe it was because of the Leviathan. And in some descriptions, he is a fire-breathing dragon-like creature that have multiple heads. And it is said the Leviathan will meet his maker on Judgment Day. But I do believe that this creature is out there. There's so much in this world that we just don't know, and so much stuff that's going on, especially in our oceans. Because how have they explored more space than they have our own oceans? Think about it. But let me know what y'all think in the comments.
Terrifying games you don't want to play, part 41. The Waterwoman Ritual. If you play this game correctly, you will receive treasures beyond your wildest dreams. But if you lose, you will be subjected to one of several horrific fates. To play this game, you will need to summon the Waterwoman, a malicious spirit who lived as the wife of a great pirate until they were both captured and executed by the Royal Navy. To do this, you'll need to have access to a large body of water such as a lake or ocean. You'll also need a torch, candle, or other instrument of fire. Once you have acquired these items, you'll need to wait until midnight before going up to the edge of the water. Using your hands, you'll have to draw a circle around yourself in the sand, and for the next step, you'll have to move very quickly. Before the tide has had time to wash away your circle, you'll need to light your candle and say the words, "Woman of the sea, why do you cry?" 3 times. If you see a figure walking out of the water in your direction, you'll know you have successfully summoned the Waterwoman. She will give you 3 chances to guess how she was executed. If you answer correctly, she will reveal to you where her husband buried his treasure in life. But if you guess incorrectly 3 times, she will do one of 2 things. If she admires your courage or thinks you're attractive, she will place an icy kiss on your cheek, forcing you to become her slave and companion for the rest of your life. But if she isn't fond of you, then your fate will be much more violent. She will drag you under the waves, leaving your body to rot at the bottom of the ocean floor. Comment whether or not you would play this game and follow for more.
this week, a lifeguard in Malibu, California opened up a barrel that was on the beach only to find a body inside, and now a homicide investigation is underway. This past Sunday, a maintenance worker at the Malibu Lagoon State Beach saw a black plastic barrel floating in the lagoon and brought it in with a kayak. He didn't open it at the time, but the next morning, a lifeguard on duty spotted the same barrel back out in the lagoon. He swam out and brought it back into the beach, and when he noticed how heavy it was, he opened it to see what was inside. And that's when he found a man's body. The origin of the barrel is unclear, but it's possible that it was brought in with the tide from the ocean. The man's identity has still yet to be remained as well, and homicide detectives are now investigating and have not released many details. However, they did note that the foot did not look very decomposed, indicating that the body may have not been in there very long. Investigators are also looking into security footage in the area to try to determine where the barrel may have come from and who may have disposed of it. Like I said, they have yet to identify the remains, and the investigation is ongoing. But this is just so eerie, and I hope they can figure it out quickly.
Did you know that ants can turn into zombies and experience the most horrifying process in nature? It all begins when a spore falls out of a fungus called Ophiocordyceps universalis, landing onto an ant. Without the ant even realizing, the spore attaches to its body and melts through a tiny spot in the exoskeleton, forcing its way inside. But this is where it gets disturbing. Under the surface, the fungus will slowly spread, wrapping around its muscles, organs, and taking over the nervous system. But the fungus doesn't want to kill the ant just yet, it wants control. So over the span of multiple days, it'll quietly feed off the ant's internal nutrients, growing stronger as the ant lives on. And once the fungus becomes strong enough, it'll fully hijack the ant's movements, using chemicals that force the ant's muscles to contract. Or the ant will suddenly abandon its own colony, never to be seen again. But the fungus controls the body, not the brain, meaning the ant stays fully aware. The fungus will then make the ant walk up onto an elevated area for one final process. On a high branch or leaf, it'll force the ant to bite down extremely hard on the surface, locking it in place, unable to move. The fungus will then absorb everything left from the ant and create a fungus stalk longer than the ant's body, which kills the ant and releases spores to infect the rest of the colony, repeating the cycle again.
The most disturbing thing about the new Melania movie is the director, who actually appears in the Epstein files, and here's the proof. The director of the film, who was handpicked by Melania Trump, is Brett Ratner. Now, Brett was a famous Hollywood director. He directed films like Rush Hour, but in 2017, 6 different women came forward and said that he had perpetuated sexual violence against them. This included actress Olivia Munn, who stated that Brett Ratner masturbated in front of her and then told others that they had had sex, which they hadn't. Actress Natasha Henstridge, who has claimed in the past that Brett Ratner forced her to give him oral sex. And there are just so many actresses and so many allegations. So in the middle of the Me Too movement, when all these allegations came to light, Brett Ratner was kind of shuttered out of Hollywood. But according to all reporting, he is now trying to force his way back into Hollywood through this film. Yes, this is a picture of Brett Ratner, P. Diddy, and Trump and Melania. But also, Brett Ratner is a very good friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. And Ratner himself even emigrated to Israel in 2023. And I will let you make of that what you will. But Ratner was also a very good friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. But Brett Ratner's recent appearance in the Epstein files is even more disturbing than it looks on the surface. So here he is in this picture. This was released by the DOJ, and this is clearly at one of Epstein's properties or on some sort of a trip. So Brett Ratner is hugging a shirtless Jean-Luc Brunel. Well, who was Jean-Luc Brunel? He was Epstein's kind of business partner in a way. He supplied young girls to Epstein. He was a notorious pedophile and sex offender himself who basically pimped out women and engaged in sex and human trafficking. And curiously enough, Jean-Luc Brunel, just like his good buddy Epstein, hanged himself in prison, allegedly, before he could ever see his day in court. A lot of people think that Jean-Luc Brunel was obviously taken out in the same fashion that Epstein was, because both of them were silenced before they could really share any information about what they knew. But that's what makes this photograph even darker. Brett Ratner was not just in a photo with Epstein. He seems to be on some sort of a trip or at one of Epstein's properties, and he's with Jean-Luc Brunel. So now you've got all three, I'm assuming Ghislaine was there too, of the pimps, the main pimps that we know in this operation, And Brett Ratner is friendly with all of them. He's so friendly with them, in fact, that he's hugging a shirtless Jean-Luc Brunel, notorious sex offender and pedophile's waist. And I do find this incredibly disturbing that Melania and Trump insisted on having Ratner direct this film when they knew what the 6 women had alleged he had done to them, which is incredibly disturbing. But it makes sense. It really seems like everybody in the Trump administration or the Trump orbit is some sort of pedophile or sex offender. So why not make the director of Melania's biopic film one too?
She did not survive her cosmetic surgery and her doctor hid her body. This is 59-year-old Floralma Roque, and she was originally from Honduras and then moved to New York to work as a nurse. In 2023, Floralma went to a cosmetic surgery clinic in Guatemala where she had been to before to get her eyelids and arms done. She wouldn't have ever imagined that she would never leave that clinic alive. On June 3rd of 2023, Floralma traveled to Honduras to go visit her father, and on the 12th, she took a flight to Guatemala because the next day she was going to be having her cosmetic surgery. Dr. Kevin Malouf was going to be performing these procedures on Floralma, and he had actually performed procedures on her before, so she was not worried at all. On June 13, Floralma wrote to her son Jose that she was ready to go into surgery, and that was the last that anyone had heard from her. On June 14th, a relative of Floralma had arrived at the clinic because she was supposed to be discharged at 10 a.m., but the workers told her that she left in a taxi 3 hours before. The family immediately knew that something was wrong because they knew she wouldn't leave without telling them, and she wasn't answering any of her phone calls or text messages. Jose had traveled from Mexico to Guatemala to talk with Dr. Malouf in person, and the doctor confirmed that Floralma had left early and he had even wheeled her to the exit. Jose was not believing any of this, and he wanted to see footage of his mom actually leaving. In these images, Jose notices this is not his mom at all, it's not the same body type, so he immediately reports it to the police and starts a social media campaign to find out the truth. Several officers spoke with Dr. Malouf and workers at the clinic, and their stories stayed the same, that Floralma had left early in a taxi. July 28, 2023, Dr. Malouf was arrested at his clinic, and it was revealed that the video showing a woman being wheeled out was actually a nurse pretending to be Floralma. Prosecution ended up showing other images from the day of the operation, and Dr. Malouf is seen carrying a black container, and this is what they believe that was Floralma's lifeless body. The staff at Dr. Malouf's clinic ended up being arrested and charged as well. A nurse ended up revealing the truth, and they stated that Floralma had died on the operating table and Dr. Malouf had disposed of her body. Floralma could have been saved, but due to medical negligence, she lost her life. Dr. Malouf didn't want any kind of legal trouble or risk of losing his job, so he decided to dispose of her body. Finally, on June 5th of 2024, Floralma's body was found on a farm in Guatemala. Sadly, weeks before, Floralma's father had passed away in Honduras, so he never really knew what happened to his daughter.